It's Thursday. I'm Andrew. And on Thursdays, I fold my laundry and I have a conversation with you. Usually, I share a dream. That's been what happens most of the times that I'm having these folding laundry with Andrew on Thursday chats. But I suppose I wouldn't necessarily have to always fold laundry, right? I do think I have to, no, I would always have to fold laundry because that's in the title. I wouldn't always have to have dreams because they're not necessarily in the title. Oh, I did think at one point it might be interesting if at some point in the future I did a season where all the episodes were movies. And I talked about the movies. I didn't identify them as movies. I just sort of talked about things that happened. Because I think that one of the things that's interesting about both dreams and movies, and a little bit novels to television shows, to some degree, it's a little bit different with television shows though, is that our psyche really has the ability to integrate those experiences into our sense memory, into our bodies, into the times of our life where we watched those movies or had those dreams in such a way that the flow of existence doesn't distinguish this is a dream, this isn't a dream. That was a loud sweater, wasn't it? It's a very outrageous sweater. Look at that. Oh, but speaking of sweaters, I am wearing a sweater I've never worn on an episode before. And I thought I have to wear this sweater because it's a sweater that's past its prime. I usually don't even wear it like to work or anything because there are big holes, gaping. Look, there's a gaping hole in my elbow. As long as I wear a dark blue long sleeve t-shirt, no one knows that there's a gaping hole there. Unless it's someone who's like sitting right there, kitty corner behind me, and they sort of like, does that man have a hole? I wonder if he knows. And they nudge their partner. They're like, should we tell him that he has a hole in his sweater? Am I speaking too softly? One of the things that's happened to me in old age, middle old age, whatever it is that I find that sometimes I start speaking softly, and that's ironic because sometimes I have trouble hearing. There's a possibility that this is the last episode of the first season of this show. 13 has always been my favorite number, and this is the 13th episode. Some of you may have noticed that episode 7 was taken down. I actually don't even know if anyone ever watched episode 7, but I took it down because in the middle there was some audio problems that were significant enough that I thought, well, it's not even worth it to have this on the internet. I'm taking it down. Also, I took some risks with the form of that episode, and so that doubled my reasoning for taking it down. But then later I was like, you know what? I don't want to second guess that formal choice that I made. Also, the dream itself felt a little bit vulnerable to me. And for all those reasons, I was happy to take it down because of the technical elements. But then later I thought, well, no, I need to be brave about my choices. And if there was a part of me that thought that I'll try this out, then I'm gonna stick to it. I like leaving mistakes everywhere in my life, because everyone knows that that's not the best thing that I can do. You know, I can make things that are very refined, but I think also like this moment between like when is a performance something that needs to be refined and the moment where we have the capacity to welcome people into a more open-ended space, a space where the communication is still in that formative stage. Like, I think that there's a lot of room for that. And I think historically even YouTube was prized because of the rawness, the authenticity of it, and the way in which it really invited people into a closer parasocial relationship with people they encountered. And so I want to honor that tradition, that part of that side of YouTube. There's all these sides of YouTube. That really resonates with me a lot. So this might be my last episode. I have some ideas about my second season. I've thought about maybe even using the same dreams that I had in this. I guess that would be a different series, though, wouldn't it? Because I was thinking it would be interesting to, in the second season, kind of like make the dreams using more classic, like fictional and like visual elements. But then it would not be this, would it? So I'm thinking of having a second series, and the second series would be, the second incarnation of these dreams. These are not like my best dreams. They are dreams that really stood out to me in the moment before I, came on board to make this film. When I say this film, I mean this particular film that you're in with me at this moment, watching the film of this episode 13. But I also mean this film as an archetype of experience within the genre of this series. There's always a moment where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna make it tonight, it's Thursday night, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Do you know how I don't think I've ever folded a tie on here. And I was gonna wear this tie, I had this suit coat, or a really nice combination, for a presentation that I had to give for my class. And I was so excited about, the whole ensemble that I had picked. Almost fold. I don't store my suit coats folded, but this is a folding laundry show. There was a black board marker, a whiteboard marker with black ink that I almost tried to fold into this. I'm sure that would ruin everything. And then, like, moments before I had to leave at 6:30 in the morning, I realized that my presentation was the next day, and it was too late to change clothes, so that the clothes that I would be wearing for my actual presentation would definitely be my second best choice for that presentation. The presentation on Wednesday went off kind of without a hitch. It was not a problem. I'm not proud of it. It wasn't rough by intention like this series is, and it was not refined by hard work and collaborative decisions either, because it was in a group, and some parts of the group did not want to collaborate very much. Truthfully, I am not shocked that people in school don't always really want to enter into true collaboration when they are working with groups. I am such an idealist that I just believe this is how I used to fold my ties all the time into these little circles, and then I would place them into a shoebox. Now I have a tie rack instead, but I still feel nostalgic for the days that I used to do that. Sometimes I put my socks on the lower shelf of my coffee table, and maybe at the end of this episode, I will show you my coffee table full of folded laundry. I just thought of that between this, my 13th episode, and the last episode that I filmed, which was probably actually my second time refilming episode 7, which has not yet been released on the internet. So don't worry, if you are the one person who's watching these as they come out, and you've been kind of upset about the debacle around episode 7, don't worry, it is going to be resolved, even if episode 13 is the last dream in this season. This is the last dream in the season. It's 9 minutes into this show and I haven't started a dream. Here I go. I need to move this laundry first. Do hear my couch groaning? I do have the craziest story about this couch, and I'm not going to tell you on the internet. So you are really going to have to come and visit me. I mean, I really love visitors that come to stay for a couple of days. I'm walking in the woods. It's about dusk, and it's not a cultivated or a curated wood. You know, there are no landscapers who come in and remove the trees when they fall and that clear areas that look like little mowed lawns. Like the debris on the forest floor is an important part of these, and there's like a real variegated sense of like how the trees have unfolded over time. Some very, very old oaks and poplars. I think we're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or at least the northern half of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and it's just it's very near the big lakes, not near the farms. Although there is a place in Michigan always where those two things can both happen together. It's my job to get the activity ready for the younger people who are on this retreat. And I'm walking in this part of the woods to prepare for this because that's my role. And it's not like, the feeling that I have is not one of drudgery nor of excitement. It's one of acceptance, but also there's a very positive feeling. Like I feel like I belong to a set of tasks and a group of people that are worth belonging to. And while, you know, I'm having to do work more than I'm having to do like something fun right now, well, I think maybe a lot of other people are off doing fun things. I don't begrudge the work because it feels nice to be a part of something. And also now when you hear like what's actually going on, you'll hear that it's right up my alley. It's kind of a quest that the younger people are going to be on, and the older adults, people that are my age, have to provide the foils and the context to give this quest meaning. I guess I'll do a little association jog right here and say that when my kids were young, and by young I mean 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7. They had cousins that were just 1 year older than each of them. And it was a new thing in our family because myself and my brother were the first to have children, and they were little children. And so our family had a very like specific dynamic to their holidays. And now suddenly there were very little people who made lots of demands. And I loved playing with very little people, especially if it was imaginative play. And so one of the things that I sort of like took it upon myself to do was I would send the children on quests, and I would tell them they had to go to the land of behind the Garagia, and they had to go into the lair of the lawn maraca, or, you know, like you get the idea. I was trying to like help them imagine a world. But I warned them that there were a certain kind of monsters that were there, and so if they saw that monster, the most important thing was that they get as flat against the ground as possible and make absolutely no noise, no giggling, especially no giggling, because the monsters could actually literally smell the giggles. They hated them so much. And they also could not move a muscle. There's no touching each other, like just like laid there, and you had to be quiet. And then those monsters would just pass by, and it would be no big deal. And so they would, and there were like always 4 parts of the quest, and I notified them about where the monsters would be. And so then when they went to part 1 and part 2 of the quest, I would go and get a series of blankets and wigs and turn into the monster that was in the place, and I would make ungodly noises and surprise them, and they would scream and then immediately get down on the floor and try to lay still and giggle. And it was such fun. That's the sort of quest that's going on here. But in this quest, it was a bunch of families, and we weren't related to each other. I guess we were friends, or we belonged to some civic organization. Like often in my dreams and life, that would be a church or a school. And so the younger people, though, in this case, were interesting because the teams were divided up with like both like elementary school children, high schoolers, and then also post-adolescents. So that's a really wide range of groups in these teams. But the younger people did really well together. And, you know, the older ones kind of made it fun for the younger ones. This is a black t-shirt that I have. I never, ever want to get rid of. I just love a black t-shirt. Do you feel that way too? Emily, if you're watching this, I know you do. You're the only one I feel confident about this with. Well, who else might? Maybe Andrew Gates loves a black t-shirt too. Maybe you used to. Was that in the emo days, Andrew Gates? Are these real people? I don't use real people's name on this series. Probably not then. Probably those were pseudonyms, and they don't correspond to actual people. So when you look them up on the internet, you've got the wrong person. It was all a ploy to get you to bark up the wrong tree. But speaking of trees, the adults in their role of foils, well, in terms of like the story of the quest, what they had to do is they had to they had to follow a bunch of clues, they had to solve a puzzle, and that would lead them to a particular revelation that would also include a kind of treasure of some kind. That was what the big overall arcing plan was. But there were ogres, and if an ogre successfully like tagged one of the members of their team, they had to stop questing, and instead they had to perform a ritual sacrifice, not of a human. They just had to find an object and then like imbue that object with meaning, and then create some form of sacrificial transformation for that object, which is very time consuming, right? And a bummer. But you know, rules are rules, and you can't go around them. So I was in charge of helping the adults who are playing the roles of the ogres get into their habitats. And so I was in the woods, and all of a sudden I noticed, oh, there's one of they were called compartments. There's one of the compartments that the ogres are going to live in. And I kept on like, now I'm looking at the tops of the trees, because that's where they're up in the tops of the trees. And eventually I saw a second one, and it took a long time before I mean, there's just so many trees in this woods, and it took forever for me to finally find these compartments. And these compartments were amazing. They were made out of a tent-like canvas, but I would say it had the smoothness of like a silky Egyptian cotton. Like, I was looking for this t-shirt to put on underneath this sweater before I started the show, because look, you can't even see it. Can you see? Oh, there you can see it. Look, I have a red t-shirt on, but it doesn't really matter because that's not part of the show. And so they were canvas-like, but in terms of shape, they looked like giant cigarette boxes. If a human was the size of a cigarette, then that's how big these cigarette boxes were. So they were rectangular, and on one side of the cigarette box, obviously the part that opens, they were open to the center of the game. And the funny thing is that no one would see that these compartments even existed, much less to see that there was actually like a pattern involved in them. And even less so that once you saw, but once you saw that they were there, like almost immediately you started to like notice the pattern. And as soon as you noticed the pattern, you also noticed that they were all facing each other. And once you noticed that they were all facing each other, you realized that they all pointed to a clearing in the woods. It looked like a natural clearing, like maybe a ritual clearing of some kind. And it wasn't a perfect clearing. It was a clearing that was marred a little bit by, decay and bushes and old logs that haven't quite sunken down. But there was something ancient something about the sun, something about, moon cycles that had kept this clearing as a real entity in this wood. And whoever had magically designed this process of where these containers would exist and how hard it was to see them and find them, it was just amazing. So the older people came out, and now it's my job to help them find their compartments, because they're going to play the role of the ogres. And in doing so, like every time they came out, I was just like astonished. Like I almost wanted to laugh at them, because they too found it so hard to even see the containers, the compartments. And I had to show them to them, and once I showed them, like every time, they all had this like, oh, look, there's another one, and suddenly they could see them all, and then they had like this series of revelations that kind of opened up to them. But then they were having the hardest time getting up into them, but because this is part of my role, I was just starting to escort them up into these compartments. And after I had escorted a few of them up and realized that nobody seemed to be able to do it unless I escorted them up, I suddenly realized that I was flying up. And I was just astonished by it. And I was able to make 2 more trips and now have like a consciousness that I was flying while I was taking them up and trying to just be casual and chatty and not be lording it over them, the fact that I could fly. But soon, the ecstasy that I was feeling by not only being so useful and being part of something that was just so playful and delightful and meaningful, and then to be gifted with this ability to fly, it was like almost too much for me. In fact, it was exactly too much for me, enough that I was expelled from the dream with the emotion of elation at all these discoveries. And I was trying to think about what was the strongest emotion in the dream, and there's no question that it was this kind of like emotion of unexpected discovery, but then the discovery kept on opening upon itself. Like this discovery leads to this other discovery, which leads to this other discovery. And each discovery reveals increasingly meaningful patterns, and along with the discoveries, as the story unfolds, my meaning within it grows too. So one of the things that I always talk about in these episodes is that I don't believe that dreams are for the dreamer. I think that dreams are for the world. I'm not exactly sure, why I feel so confident about it. I grew up in a very religious context, and it was very late in life, like within the last 5 years, that I suddenly, and I belonged to this kind of religious organization group that believed that God spoke to them directly. Not everyone, and not all the time, but that was something that you should desire, listen for, attend to, respond to, because it happens sometimes. So for me, that was kind of a bummer, because God was definitely not talking to me, and I was trying my absolute best to do everything that they told me God wanted me to do. And secretly, I had some other things about me that I thought might disqualify me right out of the get-go. And so, I felt kind of disqualified out, and then pushed hard out of that kind of religious world. It was a world that I loved very much, and that experience of being expelled from that garden was very difficult. And then, like gradually over time, I decided to start listening to my dreams more, because I always loved my dreams. And there was some point at which I was like, oh, if there is a God, what could I imagine that God to be capable of, to be full of? And like of course you want God, any God, to be transcendent and powerful, but also loving, generous, endless capacity, endless sense making, and there is something remarkably special about the idea of a human, so fragile, so mortal, so on the brink of death every moment. A human being able to make an actual connection with that level of transcendence, right? Like this is the reason why religion is so meaningful to people, is because we do want so much to find these kinds of profound meaning. And I realized that, like, when I have a dream, I think that God is talking to me. I don't think God conforms to, the boundaries of any of the stories that we have, but I don't think it's a bad idea to tell stories about God. I think that that's pretty important, and to cherish the old stories that exist about God, because I think that those stories are both instructive and helpful, and massage the contours of our own imagination so that we're ready for more. But I think that, like, dreams are meant to be shared. I don't think that that a scientific explanation of how dreaming works in the brain is sufficient to account for the experience of dreams as they, the fiddle bow, run their vital what is it called? Their vital massaging across the strings of our life. Oh, it took so long to get out. Did you even stay this long? I'm not discounting the scientific explanation of how dreams work. And I'm certainly not opposed to any of the functionalist ways that people describe dreams, helping our cognition, helping our bodies. But I feel like if we can't account for the magic, the meaning of the dreams at the same time, without being worried that discounts the other explanations of what dreams are, then we have lost all the flavor of living. So my question is, what is that dream, because it's your dream too, bring for you? Did you, like me, want to climb into those boxes? Was it the ascending that was the best? Was it the idea of being with this group of people who so joyously played together, old and young? Was it the crunch and snap of unexpected logs dry on the forest floor with the greenery around and the smells? I'll see you next season.